All right. So I have two articles for you, which kind of sort of have a through line. They both involve the government, and but one is just going to be my general overview of the week in Trump. But this first article is specific to the chilling effect of this administration on a specific group of people. Of course, the LGBT plus community. All right. So it is titled Homeland Security Can Now Spy on LGBTQ plus people and Groups as Threats to U.S. Safety. Yeah, okay, because as we all know, the LGBT plus community is a total threat to national security. Okay. Now, let us get into the article. In another reversal of the Biden administration's expansion of federal protections for LGBTQ plus Americans, the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, has eliminated language in internal documents prohibiting the surveillance of individuals or groups based solely on their sexual orientation or gender identity, Bloomberg reports. Right, because what could possibly go wrong by removing that? I mean, why would people think that people are going to be surveilled simply because of their sexual orientation or gender identity based on this? Like firing lawyers as, a normal thing people do, and not wanting to scream that they want to do corruption. So, yeah. 2 weeks ago, the DHS Office of Intelligence and Analysis updated its policy manual to fall in line with President Donald Trump's executive orders, excising diversity, equity, and inclusion policies from federal agencies and declaring there are only two immutable sexes, male and female. And not only have I pointed out the bullshit in that there being two immutable sexes, but I also posted in my community posts a link to a video from a science teacher, an evolutionary biologist named Forrest Belkai, explaining all the ways that is just so wrong. And those people who scream basic biology don't actually understand biology. Because he even admits that, yes, we are taught basic things in freshman biology, but that doesn't mean it's the end-all be-all. And that's what I keep emphasizing in my videos when people scream that, is that it's not basic biology. If basic biology was the only biology anybody ever needed, then scientists wouldn't have to go into further study of biology. The fact that they need further study kind of debunks the idea that you just need basic biology to understand biology. Anyway, moving on. The terms sexual orientation and gender identity, which were added to the list of protected groups and individuals at the direction of the Biden administration, have been removed. Language in the manual now reads, OSIC, or Open Source Intelligence Collection, personnel are prohibited from engaging in intelligence activities based solely on an individual's or group's race, ethnicity, sex, religion, country of birth, nationality, or disability. The use of these characteristics is permitted only in combination with other information, and only where 1. Intended and reasonably believed to support one or more of intelligence and analysis, national or departmental missions, and 2. narrowly focus in support of that mission or those missions. So, yeah, they're basically screaming we want to be able to surveil LGBT plus people and groups because we want to terrorize them. Ah, yes, let's bring back the 40s, 50s, 60s, and I'm sure it happened even before then. Yeah, let's just bring back the time when people who were gay or trans or anything other than straight or cis were scared that any little thing that they did would ensure that they could get arrested or beat up. Now, granted, the beating up part is still scary, but generally not from the police or other law enforcement. So, yeah, now we're giving carte blanche to law enforcement to beat people up simply because they're gay or they're trans. So, yeah, great times, great times. The Trump administration reversed Biden's executive order facilitating the addition of sexual orientation and gender identity to the intelligence agency's prohibited list on his first day in office. Biden's order, signed on his first day in office, entitled Preventing and Combating Discrimination on the Basis of Gender Identity or Sexual Orientation, was hailed at the time by the Human Rights Campaign as the most substantive, wide-ranging executive order concerning sexual orientation and gender identity ever issued by a United States president. Today, millions of Americans can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that their president and their government believe discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity is not only intolerable but illegal. But, this new administration said, Bexies! Yeah. Great. The Office of Intelligence and Analysis focuses on domestic intelligence gathering, often involving U.S. citizens and others in the country. It has a long track record of civil liberties and civil rights abuses, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. Since at least 2016, INA officers have conducted interviews with people held in jails without sufficient constitutional protections, targeting journalists and activists protesting local monuments under the guise of Homeland Security, surveilled racial justice demonstrators, and monitored political views shared by millions of Americans about topics like abortion, government, and elections. That DHS baldly asserts will lead to violence, the group said following passage of the National Defense Authorization Act in 2024. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, a longtime LGBTQ plus antagonist, was confirmed as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security in January. So, yeah, you can go back to being afraid to exist, which awesomeness. Now, before I go to our to the NPR's rundown of the week in Trump, let me just, there was a newly completed objective in Project 2025. This was completed on February 26th, and it is end data collection on gender identity. Because obviously trans people are just like everyone else, so we don't need to actually collect data on them. Yeah, why would we want to do that? All right, so speaking of horrible things and horrible people, Trump. So let's get to the rundown on the week in Trump. One thing that upended years of U.S. foreign policy and other big Trump developments. Because, upending foreign policy is always a good thing, right? On the 3-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the United States this week sided with Russia at the United Nations. That upended decades of U.S. foreign policy that aligned with allies and viewed Russia as an adversary. Instead, with the transactional nature of President Trump, American foreign policy has been reoriented to one that downplays alliances and is open for business with any country, depending on what's in it for the United States in the short run. And that's a very, something to be emphasized. In the short run, Trump does not care what's going to happen in the long term. The man is in his late 70s. By the time the shit hits the fan globally, that the U.S. becomes a pariah or whatever else, what other bad things might come down the pike, Trump doesn't care about, because he will not be alive. Anyway, instead I read that already. So let's go to what happened. On Monday, the U.S. voted with Russia against a UN resolution condemning Russia for invading, but the Ukrainian resolution, which the U.S. tried to make Ukraine table, was approved by the wider body. And in a loss for the U.S., it failed to get the UN to vote for its resolution that urges a negotiated end to the war, that doesn't mention Russia's aggression. So just to recap that paragraph, the U.S. didn't pass any resolution that voted against resolutions that condemned Russia for doing the thing it did, which is invade Ukraine. And they wouldn't allow Ukraine to even bring up their resolution. Well, they tried anyway. Russia tried to table Ukraine's motion, which did indeed blame Russia because, well, those of us who have eyes and a working memory know who invaded who. So, and then they also wanted to, now it's great they wanted to negotiate an end to the conflict. The problem is that if you can't even get right who the bad guys are, who the one who invaded who, I mean, why punish Ukraine for getting invaded? So, yeah. The foreign policy shift was evident as European leaders visited Trump this week at the White House to talk about reaching an agreement to end the war in Ukraine. First up was French President Emmanuel Macron, who commended Trump for working with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on a rare minerals agreement that would provide more security guarantees. Trump contended during the meeting that Russia's President Vladimir Putin is not looking for world war. Are you sure about that? It was another example of Trump taking a friendlier position to Putin than past American presidents. Friendlier? He is up Putin's ass. It's beyond friendly at this point. Also on display, though, was Trump's tougher stance towards allies and his transactional nature. He again falsely stated that Europe's money to Ukraine is in the form of loans. Macron interjected at one point, correcting Trump. Exactly. The second he finished his sentence about this being loans, I don't think he even was allowed to finish a thought before Macron interjected. Not only did he interject, but Trump had this fascination with Macron's knee. It's one thing to put your hand on someone's knee when you're talking and then immediately remove it. He kept the hand on the knee. And he kept wanting to put the hand back there. Macron had to pick up his hand and physically put it back on his side of the room. So, yeah. Macron, I remember when Macron first ran for president, and his campaign advisor mentioned about his charm, that he could seduce a chair. And apparently it works on men too. At least it worked on Trump. He adores Macron's accent. Now, is that enough for actual facts to enter his brain? It doesn't seem likely. It sounds like he listens to Macron speak the way I listen to Brogue. That I have to go back and re-listen to whatever the person is saying because I'm just enamored with the accent. But anyway. No, in fact, to be frank, we paid, Macron said, while reaching over and lightly grabbing Trump's arm. We paid 60% of the total effort. It was like the U.S. loans, guarantees, grants. Similarly, later in the week, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer also corrected Trump, albeit with a more delicate approach. He also said that much of what was given to Ukraine from Europe was gifted. I thought Macron was being pretty delicate with what he said. I mean, he called him Dear Donald, for crying out loud. I mean, now, granted, I'm not aware of Trump oohing and ahhing over Keir Starmer's accent, so maybe Macron could get away with being more blunt because, Trump isn't listening anyway. So he can get the actual facts in, and Trump isn't going to stop him, even though he did this. So I'm not sure what that was, whether he thought he knew what Macron was saying and was like, yeah, kinda, or if that was just I just doing this to pretend I actually understand what Macron's saying. But anyway, either way, he did try to smooth over what Macron was saying, as if a man who gave the money to Ukraine doesn't know what the fuck he did. I mean, it's one thing for Trump to tell Americans what he thinks Europe did, but to try to tell a European who actually knows, because he's in power, he's part of the deal-making process, what he actually did. I mean, come on now. All right. So here are some other important things that happened this week related to this story. A deal with Ukraine on accessing rare earth minerals appears close to agreement, and Ukraine's President Zelensky is expected to meet with Trump at the White House today, which is Friday. France said it is also pursuing a minerals deal with Ukraine, which is fine. I mean, it sounds like Ukraine, Trump initially wanted Ukraine to give them 50% of their minerals and other natural resources, and Ukraine would get butkus. But because Zelensky actually has working brain cells, that he's working on a deal for security guarantees. Like, okay, you want our resources? Great. We're not giving that up until we get some sort of guarantee that Russia isn't going to squash us like a bug. but I didn't know about France. Trump called the potential deal very well advanced on Thursday, but he didn't want to jinx it. He said there have been very good talks with both parties. I think Russia has been acting very well, he said of the negotiations to end the war. Of course they were acting well. You are willing to give them everything they want. Why wouldn't they be acting well? Duh. But I have full confidence in Trump that he will say or do something to Zelensky that will scuttle the deal. Because Trump seems to think that his shit don't stink and he can get away with anything. And the fact that everybody is acting like that's true isn't helping. So it will be really nice for Zelensky to stand up to whatever bully tactics Trump has. Actually, he's already done that because they're still working on the deal. It's not that Ukraine fell over and are letting Trump basically take everything they want from Ukraine and give Ukraine nothing. Simply because it's payment for services rendered. When no, Ukraine is getting their asses handed to them by both sides now. Of course, Zelensky isn't going to stand up, isn't going to let that happen. Heck, he was even willing to resign in order to get NATO membership or to get security guarantees. That's how much he loves his country. He is willing to personally resign the presidency. He's willing to give up power. And hint, hint, Trump, maybe you should take advice, use Zelensky as a role model, someone who's willing to give up power to help his country. So, but no, that won't happen with anyone other than potentially Zelensky. But I don't think that he's going to need to resign. And even if he does, I wonder how many Ukrainians would happily vote him in again. Because, they're happy with the way he's handling things. He, unlike what Trump seems to be saying about his low poll numbers, he's polling over 50%. He's doing just fine in the polling. So, no, Trump just wants to make anyone who he's negotiating against, he's hoping that if he can make it seem like, oh, it's in your best interest, I'm doing you a favor, that he looks like he's the good guy, regardless of what reality actually teaches us. Anyway, moving on. One of the sticking points, however, is that Ukraine wants firmer security guarantees, like I said. Trump, though, said at a meeting with his cabinet that he's not guaranteeing security for Ukraine. That's up to Europe. I'm not making security guarantees, he said, adding, NATO you can forget about. Okay. So, Trump is his own worst enemy. Because this is why Zelensky is coming to the White House. Now, maybe Trump is just trying to be a tough guy and that when he meets with Zelensky, he will soften. But I don't think he's smart enough to do that. That would require some sort of 3D chess type level of skill, which Trump does not possess. So basically, Zelensky is going to come to the White House and he's going to go away empty-handed because he's not going to get the security guarantees. And without security guarantees, there's no deal. Now, I did hear on the news that the other angle that Zelensky is working on is that if companies invest in Ukraine, then it is in the U.S.'s interest to protect these companies that are set up in Ukraine, which would mean bringing troops into Ukraine. And if that works, then he'd be getting security guarantees without getting security guarantees. So that's a possibility. Now, that is someone with skill. That is someone with a modicum of intelligence. But, he's a comedian, he's a lawyer. So basically, he's everything that Trump is not, which by that I mean intelligent. And NATO you can forget about. Well, make up your mind, Donald. Your first term you wanted the U.S. out of NATO. So make up your mind. Do you want to tell people who can and cannot become part of NATO, or do you want to leave? I mean, now that Europe is, ironically enough, upping their defense budgets because they're afraid of Russia, maybe Trump is going to be like, yeah, I'll stick around. Who knows? And of course, he's dumb enough to think that he had something to do with it. At the same meeting, Vice President Vance chided the media for drawing conclusions about which side Trump is on while he is trying to negotiate an end to the war. It's pretty fucking obvious what side he's on. Don't make it sound like he's being a objective third party here. No, it's obvious what side he's on. If it wasn't obvious, he would be willing to admit that Russia started the war. But the fact that he can't bring himself to do it, yeah, basically he's on Russia's side. It's really not that hard. And you can chide the media all you want. You just are making yourself look dumb. Like the dumb hick you pretend that you are. So, and for those who don't know what that's about, look up Hillbilly Elegy. Anyway, moving on. But on Thursday, in the White House meeting with Starmer, Trump contended putting security there, that's the easy part. And he said, we're going to see if we can get a lot of it, the territory, Ukrainian territory, back for Ukraine if it's possible. So here is Trump doing what Trump does best. Saying one thing one time, saying the opposite thing the next time, and then you just have to figure out which Trump is going to show up for the deal making. Because he's going to say everything to everybody. So that way, no matter what he does, he can point to and say, yeah, I said I was going to do that. Even though you also said you were going to do the absolute opposite. So Trump walked back to his comment from last week that Zelensky is a dictator. Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Either you have Alzheimer's or you just don't want to admit it. He told reporters Thursday, of Putin sticking to a deal, Trump said, I don't believe he's going to violate his word. Russia already violated an agreement for Ukrainian security if Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons after the fall of the Soviet Union. But of course, Russia can never do anything wrong in Trump's eyes. Now, whether it's because Putin is a strong man and Trump wants to emulate that, or like some people think Russia has something on him. Either way, he's up Putin's butt. Trump later said of his Friday meeting with Zelensky, we are going to be signing a deal together, probably in front of the media. Well, we'll see about that. Depends on which Trump negotiates the deal. So, is it the one that said no security guarantees, or if it's the other one who actually wants to sound reasonable? That was only one of the major stories that made headlines in the last week. There was also the email heard round the federal government that led to confusion throughout the country. Haven't they all? Testy town halls with GOP constituents pushing back on Doge's chainsaw approach to government staffing and spending, and an eyebrow-raising AI video posted without explanation to Trump's official social media accounts depicting a Gaza with a feasting Elon Musk. Gold Trump balloons, belly dancers, and Trump Gaza signs, and a lot more. Let's see if they go by the, Here's a day-by-day recap, so I'll get to all of that when we get to it in the day-by-day recap. And this is since our last analysis posted a week ago. So we're starting with Friday. Steve Bannon says it was just a wave at CPAC. For those who don't know, he totally did a Nazi salute. The Conservative Political Action Conference, while others saw it as a Nazi salute, meant to be intentionally provocative, because it fucking was. The Anti-Defamation League condemned it, and a French far-right leader canceled his trip to CPAC because of a gesture referring to Nazi ideology, he said. Just think about this. Someone who is practically a Nazi is condemning a gesture that evokes Nazi ideology. I mean, that is just some next level shit. Of course, Steve Bannon then went on to mock how he's not ready to be a leader. He's just a little boy because he can't handle a wave. Because Steve Bannon can't handle that he was called out on the fact he did a Nazi salute. The Washington Post reports that Trump Chief of Staff Susie Wiles has asked Elon Musk to better coordinate on cuts initiated by Musk's informal advisory group, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Maybe she wants him to, pay attention to what he's cutting so you don't accidentally can the people in charge of nuclear stockpiles, or who are researching bird flu, or whatever else people he fired without actually knowing. I'm wondering if that's why he sent out that email, hoping that people will tell him what agencies do before he fires people willy-nilly. All right. A Trump-appointed judge in Washington reversed his restraining order against the Trump administration's dismantling of USAID. The Trump administration restores dozens of jobs at the National Park Service. Many are to help maintain and clean parks and collect admission fees. The Park Service says it will hire 7,700 seasonal employees, up from 5,000 promised earlier in the week, and higher than the 6,350 average for the last 3 years. Colorado's Florissant Fossil Beds National Monument said on social media that it would close Monday for 2 days because of a lack of staffing. So I guess someone realized that if you're going to have a national park and want people to come, you might want to, keep it clean and collect the money and, basic shit like that. Republicans start to face testy town halls from Georgia to Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and Oregon, which is just beautiful. Probably the only thing that might actually get through to Republicans is by putting their jobs on the line, showing that people are angry about what they're doing, and maybe they might, think about their job. Of course, they're in between a rock and a hard place because I'm sure Trump is also threatening their jobs. So it's basically who are you scared of more? And I'm pretty sure they're more scared of Trump than the American people. And actually, I read recently that they're now going to only allow people into either they're going to stop doing town halls or they're only going to allow friendly people that aren't going to be confrontational. So that's how much they only care about optics. They are hoping that those will make the social media rounds to see that people are liking the new changes that but on the other hand, Elon Musk did actually say that people are going to experience pain before things start getting better. Now, are things going to start getting better? No, I don't think they will. Not under the Musk Trump leadership. But at least he was right about the pain. Okay. Trump has a testy exchange with Maine's governor of transgender athletes in an event with governors at the White House. So for those who don't know, he Maine Maine has a state law that bans discrimination based on gender identity. So they're following that law. Now, for those who are saying, "Oh, but I thought federal law supersedes state law." Yes, it does. It does supersede state law. However, this is an executive order, not a law. That's number one. It only extends the executive branch, is my understanding. So that's number one. It can become law. Wait, I think I'm confused. Actually, I know I'm confused. Sorry, my hair is way too long. I need to get a haircut. So, Trump, of course, threatened the governor, and she said, "See you in court." Now, considering there's question whether what Trump is doing with most of his executive orders are even legal, there was a Republican legislator who's since been censured by the Maine legislature because she dead named an athlete and posted pictures before and after their transition. So she was censured, and she seems to be of the mindset that Maine is the bad guys because they're not following the executive order, completely ignoring that it may not be legal. So, yeah. Anyway, Trump fires 3 top generals, including Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, C.Q. Brown, as well as military JAG lawyers. The firings are being referred to as a Friday night massacre. There was a Saturday night massacre under Nixon. So I see that Trump is trying to make up with all the other days. So anyway, there's only one reason that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs got canned, and that's because he's black. The very thing that people whine about, like Pete Hegseth whines about, this is a DEI hire, that's a DEI hire, but it's perfectly okay to fire someone based on the color of their skin. They also fired the first woman head of the Air Force because she's a DEI hire, obviously, because, whoever heard of a woman who could possibly do that job? And they fired the JAG lawyers simply because they are roadblocks to Trump's agenda. How much more transparent can you get that what your agenda is hella illegal? than by firing lawyers. Because why fire lawyers if you're going to follow the law? Obviously, they don't intend to follow the law, so obviously you need to get rid of the lawyers. The Supreme Court temporarily blocks the firings of Hampton Dellinger, head of the Office of Special Counsel, an independent agency tasked with protecting the rights of federal workers. So, at least the Supreme Court is doing one thing. They're not completely in Trump's pocket, which is great. How long this will last, I don't know, but this is only temporary, so I wouldn't get too excited. It could still happen. They might decide that, okay, yeah, let's just let him fire him. We don't know. So moving on to Saturday. Musk posts on X that federal workers are to send in 5 bullet points describing what they did the week before, or be considered resigned. Key agencies like Homeland Security, Defense, the FBI, and National Institutes of Health tell workers not to reply, but Health and Human Services told workers to do so shortly after the General Counsel of the agency told workers not to. So it's basically a war of egos. Elon Musk versus the new cabinet appointees. Kristi Noem, Pete Hegseth, Kash Patel. They probably don't like the idea that Elon Musk is, swerving into their lane. They want to be able to fire workers, not have Elon Musk do it. So yeah, and I really think, and I just love some of the creativity that some people are giving to Elon Musk as an answer to his stupid email. How about, just like Lisa Murkowski suggested, how about you learn what people do? You learn what the agencies are about, as opposed to, cutting up agencies willy-nilly. Not that the people who are currently directing those agencies know what the fuck they do, but that's a different story. But that's the email heard around the federal government that people are totally confused. Even Trump. Usually he waits a sentence before he contradicts himself. But this time he said, yeah, it's kind of voluntary, but I hear you can get fired. It's not voluntary if you can get fired if you don't respond. That's not voluntary. Either he doesn't know what words mean, or he just keeps doing the kid who's doing a book report on a book he didn't read. One of the two. I'm really not sure what to say at this point. A woman is forcibly removed from a Republican town hall in Idaho because of her protest at the event. Good on her. Now, I don't know if this is the story that I saw, but it's questionable who actually removed her. That it might not have been security. It could have been just a bunch of attendees who didn't like that she, actually has a spine and called out the Republican legislator who, for doing horrible things. I don't know. Trump posts on social media that he wants to see Musk get more aggressive. How much more fucking aggressive can he get? He's firing people and then they have to scramble to rehire people because, oopsies, we fired the wrong people. All right, now we go to Sunday. Israel sends tanks into the West Bank after bus bombings. It's the first time Israel has done so since 2002. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says on Fox News of the reasoning for firing JAG lawyers. We want lawyers who give sound constitutional advice and don't exist to attempt to be roadblocks to anything that happens in their spots. Like I said, if it's a roadblock, if you really think that anyone who has a problem with Trump's agenda is a roadblock, then you're not interested in constitutional advice, sound constitutional advice. You just want people who will lay down and play dead while you do whatever illegal thing you want to do. A centrist conservative party in Germany wins the national election, but the far-right AfD, which got a boost from Musk and Trump, doubles its result. Immigration was a big issue. Now, what people are laughing about is, yes, the AfD did improve their spot, but the centrist conservative party, also known as Angela Merkel's party, won, and they have no interest in creating a coalition with the AfD. So it's not like, yes, the AfD got the second highest votes, but it's not like that's going to help them. They're most likely going to make a coalition with the SPD, or SDP or whatever, SDP, which is Olaf Scholz's party, which is the centrist liberal party. Because the one thing they have in common is they don't want the crazies to be in charge of government. So there is that. So yes, it sucks that the AfD gained seats, but they still would have to be part of the coalition, which they're not going to be. So anyway, Trump announces he will nominate Dan Bongino for Deputy FBI Director. Bongino is a former U.S. Secret Service agent turned conservative commentator. So yeah, that's just awesome. And he seems to think that because he was a Secret Service agent, that somehow he has the qualifications to be Deputy FBI Director. Bill Barr, who was Trump's Attorney General, didn't think Kash Patel had what it took to be a Deputy FBI Director, and Bongino's even worse. So, yeah. All right, let's move to Monday. It's the 3-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. U.S. vote at the UN sides with Russia. Dellinger, the watchdog at the Office of Special Counsel, whom Trump tried to fire, requested a stay on firings of federal employees. He described at least 6 probationary employees' dismissals as apparently impermissible. Judge blocks DOJ from accessing Office of Personnel Management and Department of Education information of employees. So that's great, because why does Musk need everyone's personal information? I mean, you do not need to know how many times someone goes to the bathroom to know whether they're good employees. You do not need to know every little thing about them unless you want to extort them. Do what we say, or this'll get slashed, or that'll happen, or whatever. Nothing good comes out of needing to know every person's personal information. Trump meets with Francis Macron at the White House. Musk posts on X about the email. Failure to respond a second time could result in termination. Trump says there were a lot of genius in sending the email. Yeah, all right, whatever. A Trump-appointed judge declines to restore the AP's access to the White House because it had not demonstrated it suffered irreparable harm. Are you kidding me? You, a journalistic agency can't gain access to things like the president, and you don't think that that's irreparable harm? I mean, sure, they could have another journalist from a different agency ask their questions for them, but it's still different when you're there listening to it. I mean, I guess they could watch it on live stream, but. And don't worry, for those journalists who didn't stand up to the AP, they're getting their comeuppance towards the end of the week. The Justice Department is unable or unwilling to tell a federal judge who exactly runs DOJ. Of course not, because if they admitted it, then Musk might end up having to follow rules, and we can't have that happen. Trump is considering doing away with AFRICOM, which oversees military operations on the continent of Africa, and putting it under European command. Okay, he wants to basically cede any foreign influence to everybody but the U.S. Now, I understand that there are people who are very isolationist and think we shouldn't be the world's policeman. Granted, I think we should be a bit more subtle, not subtle, but pick our battles more. I sometimes think that we attack for reasons we shouldn't, but at the same time, you're not giving any goodwill out. So I guess that's how Trump wants to stop immigration, that people won't want to immigrate here because they hate the U.S. But yet he wants to make America great again. How can you make America great again if you're making everyone hate us? Anyway, moving on. On the email controversy and heads of agencies telling employees not to respond to it, Trump says they don't mean that combative in any way with Elon. It's about security for agencies like the State Department and FBI, he says. Trump also claims without evidence, we have people who don't show up to work, and people aren't answering because they don't even exist. Plus, we're actually going to Fort Knox to see if the gold is still there. Oh my God. That was a stream of consciousness. All right. So let me see if I understand this. We should cut the workforce because there are people who aren't answering because they don't exist. And people don't show up. Now, the people who don't show up to work, if true, obviously that's a reason for termination. But how many times have we heard from investigative journalists that that's just not happening? The people who are being terminated have gotten high marks in their performance reviews. But people aren't answering because they don't even exist. So why are you cutting the workforce? Fewer people are going to be answering. I do not understand how this works. And then, of course, this gem, we're actually going to Fort Knox to see if the gold is still there. Number one, they're probably doing this because they want to get the people's attention away from the hatchet job that they're doing on the federal government. That's one. But also there is a conspiracy out there. There is a right-wing conspiracy that is there really gold being housed in Fort Knox? What's actually there? So Trump, because he will believe anything that the right wing feeds him, has decided that he wants to go to Fort Knox to see for himself. Both him and Musk. Now, do I believe that they would correctly report that the gold is actually there? I honestly don't know. I would like to think they would, But I wouldn't be surprised if they made shit up then with that either. So, some 1,200 people attended the first Principles First Summit. It's a gathering of a group of conservatives opposed to Trump. Billionaire Mark Cuban was one of the attendees. When he took to the stage, he criticized Democrats, saying their critiques of Trump's don't matter because they can't sell worth shit. He's not wrong. The Democrats have become so not just rules based. That's not it, but they've decided that they need to be professional and that they have to speak in big words and in ways that you have to be educated to understand. The one thing that you got to give to Trump is he speaks in a way that most people can understand, provided he can get an actual thought out, but that's a different story. But he speaks with simple words. You do not need a dictionary or have gone to college to understand the words that he uses. So there is that. And then there's this idea that, oh, well, we're not going to sell, like Biden did so much for the American people. But most people don't know about it because Biden's like, oh, I'm just going to rest on my laurels. People are just going to know that it's me who did this stuff, as opposed to touting his accomplishments, letting people know not just that he did these things, but how it's helped people immediately, or or it's going to take time for this to actually be felt, but once it is, blah blah blah, something to have people grab onto, instead of, oh, inflation is down because the numbers, if you look at the stats, it says inflation's down. Well, people don't feel it. Instead of telling people, well, you're wrong, because, well, technically inflation was down, so that is true. But I don't know, explain to people that inflation doesn't mean deflation. Inflation going down simply means that the prices aren't going up as fast as they had before. But it still means prices are going up. Maybe just, telling people basic civics. Because apparently most people never took basic civics. I mean, if that were the case, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in. So yeah, he's right. The Democrats did a horrible job of selling what they've accomplished, what they want to accomplish. They just kind of assume that because they basically suffer from what a lot of Republicans who pull all sorts of shit out of their ass are doing, the trust me bro thing. This idea that we understand why we're doing this, so we don't need to explain it to you. Which, not helpful. If you're going to explain how this affects people, you should probably explain how it affects people, because the fact that someone like Trump is back as a president tells you that the people that you reached out to weren't buying what you were selling badly. Now, some people were doing it because of actual policies, like the whole war in Gaza, which, fair. But that's why Kamala should have said, I stand behind the president as his vice president, but there are things he could have done better. Like, not keep giving Israel bombs so they can continue bombing Gaza into submission when all they're doing is harming civilians and not actually Hamas. So, things like that. Just treat people like fucking intelligent human beings, even though, based on the reasoning people use to vote for Trump, I can see why so many Democrats question how many people in this country are actually intelligent. But still, people respond if you attempt to treat them like intelligent human beings. Now, if they're actually dumb as shit, then they'll respond badly, because even treating them like intelligent human beings is too much for them, but that's a different story. So yeah, I do agree with that critique that you can't if you're going to criticize Trump, you've got to really work at criticizing Trump, not just. I mean, Kamala did a great job at the debate, and then it just went downhill from there. I don't know what happened. I think because Kamala's brother-in-law is some bigwig. I don't know what business he runs. He's some bigwig on Wall Street. And so suddenly she was no longer attacking corporate America the way she used to. That didn't help. So, basically put your money where your mouth is. This idea that if you're going to criticize because you're for middle America, then accept that you and your family are going to not be as wealthy as you were because of it. Just accept that. Anyway, moving on. Oh, before I do, also at this summit, there was a bomb threat. This does not mention it, but there was a bomb threat. Someone sent an email. Now, whether this was actually someone who is MAGA, I do not know. Based on the lack of grammar, the lack of punctuation, highly likely it was a MAGA. But they claimed that they had put a bomb in their hotel room, which was in the hotel that this Principles First Summit was taking place. They also claimed to put a bomb in one of the toilets at the summit. They claimed that they put a bomb in John Bolton's mailbox. Now, this last one is probably the worst. As bad as all those three are, this one's the worst. He of course called all these people traitors. Now, he didn't just say that Michael Fanone was a traitor. He claimed he put a bomb in his mom's mailbox. Not in Michael Fanone's, but his mom's. Now, what the hell? I mean, obviously, I don't want you to, blow up any of these people. But at least if you're going to threaten someone, threaten the man. Don't threaten his mother. What the fuck? Anyway, this one is actually hilarious. Granted, I saw this video and I can't unsee it. So I demand, I insist you guys look up this video because someone gets an apparently AI-generated video to play on all the screens at the housing department. It depicts Trump kissing Musk's feet with the title, "Long Live the Real King." People in the building couldn't figure out how to turn it off, so they were ordered to unplug all TVs. Now, I don't know what's more hilarious. The AI-generated image, which, by the way, whoever generated that image literally gave Elon 2 left feet, which, if you've ever seen him dance, it checks out, but still. But you couldn't figure out how to turn it off, so you unplugged the TVs. Alrighty. I guess that makes sense if you don't know how the feed got there in the first place, but I just find it funny that they just unplugged all the TVs. All right, so we're only on Tuesday. Trump posts the Gaza AI video, which I mentioned, which was a strange video of a golden Gaza with Trump's face on it. Very bizarre. Trump suspends the head of the National Center for Education Statistics on leave, that group that tracks educational achievements in the country. Right, because just like his approach to COVID, it's perfectly fine. You know, COVID isn't a problem anymore if we don't know how big of a problem it is because we don't have the statistics. Same thing here. Every American child is a fucking genius because we don't actually know how many people are failing. So, yeah. The White House identifies Amy Gleason as administrator of Doge. And to her, her response was probably like, excuse me, what? I mean, she was hired, I think, in the first administration in this department that eventually became Doge. But, yeah, she was in Mexico at the time. So either she was just happened to be taking a vacation at the time, or they just pulled a name out of their ass. I'm leaning towards the latter. Department of Homeland Security Kristi Noem announces the launch of a registry of immigrants in the U.S. without legal status that would require them to be fingerprinted. Yeah, that's not scary at all. You know what? That actually reminds me of communism. It really does. And how do I know that? My parents, like I've mentioned before, are immigrants. They came here as refugees from Czechoslovakia. And before communism fell, we went, I think since I was a child, we went 3 or 4 times to visit family. And not only did we get the once over just going over the border, because we always landed in Germany, and we would drive to Slovakia, because, you know, we also used it as a family vacation, not just to visit relatives, but as a family vacation. And one of the things we would have to do, I mean, depending on who you got as a crossing guard, as a border guard, depended on how much you had to do. Actually, my dad at one point, one of the border agents was such a hard ass. My dad had to unscrew like certain parts of the car, like under the glove compartment or something. I can't remember exactly what, but you know, he had to take apart parts of the car simply to make sure we weren't smuggling anything in. So there was that. And my dad had to go to the local police station and register that they were there. Now, what makes this even more, which I didn't know about this at the time, makes this scarier, is because you could not legally emigrate from a communist country. My parents were tried in absentia and given prison sentences. So, looking back, This could have ended so badly for my parents. So there is that. So yeah, I can't imagine that this is going to end well. This is just going to give them ability to wrongfully accuse people of crimes so they have an excuse to deport them, because Trump has already said he's angry that there aren't more people being deported, because surprise surprise, there aren't as many immigrants committing crimes as he was led to believe, because there just aren't. And the fact that there are people, I even saw in one of my comments this idea that why is it so hard to believe that 50% of immigrants are criminals, hardened criminals? And I'm like, what? Where is this coming from? So Trump actually believed that bullshit, and now he's mad. So this is probably just a way of them to pin crimes on innocent people so they can deport them. Which should scare you, because if they are more concerned about pinning crimes on innocent people just so they can have an excuse to deport immigrants, that means that actual criminals aren't being caught. So that should scare everybody. After several testy town halls, NBC News reports Republicans are likely to curtail them, either by doing teletown halls, vetting attendees, or stopping them altogether, which I mentioned before. I forgot about the teletown halls. This is how scared Republicans are of their own constituents. And instead of, doing shit that people actually like and might might allow them to actually walk down the street without people getting violent, maybe, instead of doing that, they've decided, let's just, stay away from them. We'll still technically do the town halls, but as long as we're doing it from our ivory tower, the thing that they accuse Democrats of being in, an ivory tower, and how they've lost touch with the common people, which granted isn't completely wrong, but how is this any different than saying, oh, we're going to listen to your ideas, but we don't want to put ourselves in actual danger because people might actually get violent, because why wouldn't they? You're taking away their livelihood. You're taking away their ability to survive. I mean, that's a perfectly good reason to want to kill someone, or at least beat them up. Trump administration says 1 million federal employees responded to the "What did you do last week?" email. It's revealed that Musk himself came up with the idea. No. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says each agency is responsible for judging their employees. Except Elon said that AI was going to look over these emails. So which is it? Russ Vought claimed that he wanted to make federal employees have PTSD about coming to work. He wants them to hate to come to work. He wants to traumatize them. I think that this is what this is happening. One person does this. One person says this. One person says this. One person says the exact opposite. So nobody knows what's happening. This is intentional. It's not just that they don't know what the fuck they're doing, which is also true. They also want to traumatize people so they will quit. And I'm pretty sure one of the reasons that Trump is perfectly fine with Musk taking the heat, even though both Trump and Musk's approvals are going downward. But I'm pretty sure one of the reasons Trump is perfectly happy with Musk taking all the blame and taking and being seen as the one completely in control, like the co-president or whatever, is because he was so traumatized about the assassination attempt that, he's perfectly fine with someone trying to assassinate Elon as long as nobody tries to assassinate him again. The House passes a budget 217 to 215. One Republican voted against it. There were concerns from some Republicans on spending cuts to Medicaid in this bill. Okay. The one Republican who voted against it, I think, was Tom Massey. And his reasoning is that, that how is this going? This is going to explode the deficit. He is one of the few Republicans who, while there's a Republican president, actually gives a shit about the deficit still. He's at least consistent. He didn't like the deficit under a Democratic administration, but he doesn't like what's going to happen under the Republican one, which this is going to balloon the deficit. These Medicaid cuts are going to balloon the deficit. And so a lot of people who probably are already traumatized by the attacks from their constituents and town halls are probably not happy that they now have to deal with this because so many people rely on Medicaid. Now there are those who are super mega who think that the cuts don't go far enough, the spending cuts, but so there are people on both sides that aren't happy. But yeah, this is the only thing about this going so fast and so hard is hopefully people will wake up and realize that the Republicans have lost their fucking minds and, maybe don't vote them in again. Vote in people who are at least competent. Yes, the Democrats need to work on their messaging issue, talk more like Jasmine Crockett or AOC. Regardless of what you think of their policies, at least they talk like human beings. They don't worry about every word being in the right order or that they're speaking at a certain level. And AOC is a college graduate. It's not like she's some dumb waitress, which Republicans seem to think that she's some dumb waitress or dumb bartender, which tells you what they think about waitresses and bartenders, but also not true of AOC because that just happens to be the last job she had. She's a college graduate. So, and Jasmine Crockett is a lawyer, so again, not a dum-dum. Anyway, the New York Times reports that Doge deleted the first 5 items they say they cut. That again reduces the total amount the group has cut. Yes, because there were discrepancies. Journalists discovered there were discrepancies. There are still discrepancies. So, yeah. Not to mention, I'm pretty sure there are still classified secrets on the fucking website because that's how brilliant these idiots are. This is what happens when you get a bunch of incels. Musk has 13 kids and yet he acts like a fucking incel. How is this possible? Trump signs an executive order revoking security clearances for those working at Covington and Burling, where some Democratic lawyers work that also helped with legal advice for Jack Smith, the lead prosecutor on cases against Trump stemming from January 6th and Trump's removal of classified documents. Trump offered to send the pen he used to sign the order to Smith. God, he's disgusting. Not a disgusting troll, but disgusting. So he releases the very people who these people were working on cases mainly against Trump, but still working on cases dealing with January 6th after he releases the hardened criminals. I mean, granted, some of them are back in prison for other charges because, imagine that violent people do violence in other contexts. Shocking. But there are still plenty of people who are fearful for their lives. So let's just revoke security clearance. And now this is security clearance, so they don't have access to certain things. But I'm pretty sure that if they had a security detail as well, that would be gone too. So that's great. Trump says he would be introducing a $5 million gold card program for people who want permanent legal residency in the United States. Russian oligarchs, he said, could even qualify. Yeah, possibly, he said. Hey, I know some Russian oligarchs that are very nice people. It's possible that there are. But that doesn't change the fact that most of them aren't. Just like our oligarchs. We have some who are good people, but that doesn't mean they all are. And, oh, by the way, there's already a program for rich people to come to the U.S. This is just Trump wanting to make money off of people coming to the U.S. He doesn't give a shit about who comes to the U.S. as long as he makes money. He doesn't, all this presidency thing is a money-making scheme for him. He just wants any excuse to make money. Some Republicans start to voice unease with Doge's approach. Only now? It's been almost a month. They're only now worried? Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska, told MSNBC she wants to see more humanity and dignity in the process. I'm sorry, have you noticed who's president? Those are not two words you associate with him. Or with Elon Musk. Senator Jerry Moran, a Republican from Kansas, and the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee chairman voiced concern about farmers who supply USAID and continues to wait for more information on the cuts. Other Republicans, like Representative Nicole Maliotakis of New York, said the cuts are being done too fast and furiously and needed to be more targeted. Representative Richard McCormick of Georgia said federal workers need a chance to adjust their lifestyles. Okay, so the last couple, they didn't mention if they're Republicans or Democrats. Let me see if I can find out. I'm going to guess that these are, it just says some Republicans, so these are all Republicans. Okay. Just like with the Republicans who suddenly realized after abortion bans were passed that, people are dying because of it and because they had no understanding. This reminds me of that. This idea that they had it in their heads what cutting waste and spending would look like. And then all of a sudden they're realizing that Trump doesn't give a shit about that. Musk doesn't give a shit about that. They just want to cut because they only care about themselves and they don't give a shit about anyone else. And the Republicans who have a modicum of respectability are suddenly like, oh, we didn't expect that. I'm not sure what they expected. They know that Trump is unhinged. They know that Musk is unhinged. I'm not sure where they got this idea that they care about any of their complaints. I mean, maybe they're doing that because they're getting hammered in town halls. But either way, I'm not sure why this is a surprise. Project 2025 is a thing. You knew about that. I mean, do you think that it would have been better if these cuts came slowly? Probably not. I mean, Musk even said there would be pain. He did say that. Alina Habba, oh God, she's still around. Counselor to the president says the president expects people to respond to the email, and if they don't, there will be repercussions. Various agencies have said the opposite, that responding would be voluntary. Oh, good. So the tug of war continues. Nothing to see here. 21 people with technical expertise resigned instead of helping Doge. They said they refused to dismantle critical public services. As for a response from NPR's Asma Khalid, Levitt said, "Don't let the door kick you on the way out." When all I can say is when people tell you who they are the first time, listen. This should come as no surprise that these people are this callous and cruel. But, you know, it would be nice if, the people who were the good guys could go back and correct whatever horribleness Doge does to our systems. That would be great. I understand why they resigned, because it's either that or be forced to help with this nonsense. But it would be nice if they found a way to help instead of resigning. That would have been nice. Hegseth visits the detention center at Guantanamo in his first trip since confirmation. Oh, good. Could somebody please leave him there and lock him away somewhere? That would be nice. Let's see how he likes being, treated like sewage. Like he's not actually human. Because stories have been coming out about the way these migrants were treated while in Guantanamo. So, yeah, give him a taste of that. Politico reports on a $25 billion proposal by private contractors for mass deportations conducted by what's essentially a private army. Yes, that is exactly what they are. Representative Darrell Issa, a Republican from California, introduces a bill to stop nationwide judicial injunctions that get in the way of Trump's agenda. Again, nothing says we want corruption to reign than to stop judges from, stopping the corruption. If you really want to stop corruption, fraud, and abuse, maybe getting rid of judges who stop that, not the best plan. All right, now we're to Wednesday. At Trump's first cabinet meeting, Musk said the OPM email was not a performance review, but a pulse check review. He says to expect another email to be sent. Wait, are you telling me that all you have to do is acknowledge your existence? Because he wants to be sure that the emails actually correspond to living people? Is that what I'm reading? Because the people who work at those agencies, the heads of those agencies, are too stupid to know that? But someone who is dismantling the government and doesn't know enough to not fire in people who are critical to the system knows better? If you have a pulse and 2 neurons, you can reply, Musk said. Oh, that would be 1 more than you have. Actually, 2 more than you have. He claimed that there are lots of dead people taking checks. Right, because again, the person who is supposed to be in charge of the entire federal government would know better than someone who's just in charge of one agency. Because obviously you can keep track of millions of people much better than you can a few thousand. That makes perfect sense. He claimed that there are lots of... Oh, I read that right. Trump says the million people who haven't responded are on the bubble. Trump calls the cuts a circumcision and that the federal government is bloated and fat and disgusting. And I agree with Stephen Colbert that it would be a circumcision to get rid of him because he's a dickhead. And, it's totally projection when he calls the federal government bloated, fat, and disgusting. Because personally, that's how I see him. Trump says he wants to recover the weaponry left behind in Afghanistan in 2021. Yeah, good luck with that. Trump also says he may give Canada and Mexico another month's reprieve on tariffs. Spoiler alert, not happening. I have to tell you that, on April 2nd, I was going to do it on April 1st, but I'm a little bit superstitious. I made it April 2nd. The tariffs go on. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And, that's simply because he doesn't know how math works. It's in March, not April. But, that would require, being able to count better than a fourth grader. It says he went to college, but I'm really questioning whether he managed to get past elementary school. Amazon's Jeff Bezos, owner of the Washington Post, seeks to move the opinion page to a more free markets and libertarian direction. And the editor of the opinion page promptly resigned. So that tells you how well things are going at the Post. The White House strips the White House Correspondents Association of the ability to determine press polls. We will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who have never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility, Levitt said. Translation: right-wing influencers and other right-wing media, because God forbid we would have someone on there who is level-headed. We just want people to report what they want to report because we want everything to be 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. Again, whichever dystopian novel you prefer. And actually, I agree with Colbert on this as well. Those correspondents who are, shocked Pikachu that this is happening. Well, where the hell were you when the AP was banned for not calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico? I mean, Colbert had a CNN correspondent on, and she just called it the Gulf. She refused to say whether she would call it the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico. But this is the fucking AP. They cater to the worldwide media, not just the U.S. Great that the U.S. wants to call a body of water the Gulf of America. Fine. You don't get to tell people in France that they have to. And if French media take a story from the AP, then they can't change the Gulf of Mexico from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. They can't change it back. So, yeah. So, to then find out that the freedom of the press in that regard turns into this should come as literally no surprise to anyone. So, maybe you should have stood up. I keep rehashing this. The people who are allowing this to happen, who are either obeying in advance or who are like, maybe if I don't make any waves, I'm not going to get into trouble, have never read the fucking Holocaust poem. This isn't how it works. It's going to end badly. Even if you have been a supporter of Trump from the very beginning, you're going down. Because Trump doesn't care about any of you. Anyway, moving on. Trump threatens to sue journalists for using anonymous sources or creating a new law to ban the common practice. Okay, there's a reason why people use anonymous sources. It's so people who are talking to the press won't get into trouble. I mean, where the fuck would we have been if Deep Throat had to give his name? I mean, eventually we found out who Deep Throat is, and let's face it, he absolutely hated that the journalist decided to give him the same name as a popular X-rated film at the time, which I have to admit I can't blame him for. But but where would we be if he wasn't the whistleblower who told us about all the shit that's happening in the Nixon White House? Where would we be? I mean, it's possible, even without him, that we would have gotten rid of Nixon, but where would we be? And so anonymous sources play a role. It's so they can tattle on the government or tattle on their business or whatever and not face repercussions from their employer for doing that because they don't know who did. Makes perfect sense. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard says 100 officers from 15 agencies fired over sexually explicit chats, including about gender transition surgery. Okay. First off, I just read in LGBTQ Nation that that's not actually happening. There aren't sexually explicit chats. Now, were there chats about gender transition surgery? Possibly. But that's not sexually explicit. I mean, if you consider talking about a penis or a vagina sexually explicit, then may I suggest you go back into a cave? Because you can't get away with hearing about that. I mean, what, do you go to the doctor, especially an OBGYN, and put cotton in your ears because they invariably are going to talk about your vagina or your breasts? Seriously, what the fuck? Let's just call it for what it is. It's not that she's a prude and she doesn't want to hear about someone's breasts or someone's vagina or penis or whatever it is. She just wants to cancel trans people. She wants to ensure that trans people are not welcome in public life. That is the only thing that she's trying to do. The Merit Systems Protection Board says the firings of the 6 fired probationary employees identified by Dellinger, the head of the Office of Special Counsel that Trump tried to fire, until April 10th. All right, so at least that they stayed the firings, at least that. Meantime, a federal judge said Dellinger can stay in his job until at least Saturday so she can draft a permanent ruling. The Trump administration wants the Supreme Court to intervene. Of course he does, because he's hoping the Supreme Court will do what he wants. The U.S. saw its first reported death from the measles since 2015. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said in a cabinet meeting that it was a member of the Mennonite community. The child was unvaccinated. And this is why religious exemptions are pure bullshit. because this kid did not need to die. He could have gotten vaccinated. Now, obviously, there are some people who are immunocompromised and cannot get the vaccine, which is why herd immunity is so important, so that the people around them are vaccinated, so that will keep them safe. And if you don't give a shit about the more vulnerable among us, may I suggest you leave society and go live in a cave? Because what the fuck are you doing living in civilization, in a society, if you don't want to protect people in that society? It just is maddening to me. I'm sure these are the same dipshits who still go to the doctor. Why? Why go to the doctor if you decided that life is a crapshoot and you don't actually care whether you get sick or not, let alone whether other people get sick? The Trump administration unveils a $1 billion plan to try and combat bird flu and bring egg prices down. Okay, how about not firing the people who are in charge of researching bird flu? That's a great place to start. But it is good that he actually does care about that. That is a point. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts allows a freeze on USAID payments to continue through at least Friday. So, yeah, John Roberts is turning evil. Trump signs an executive order expanding DOJ's powers. Why not? Because they don't already have carte blanche to break the government. Let's give him more power. Trump is preparing to use alien enemies law to speed up deportations. A Venezuelan gang that the Trump admin labeled a terrorist organization is the target, an official tells CNN. Okay, alien enemies is in relation to governments, not organizations. What the fuck? California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, a potential 2028 presidential candidate, announces he is launching a podcast. Trump effectively ends Chevron's ability to operate in Venezuela. He rescinded a Biden-era exemption to Venezuelan sanctions to allow Chevron to continue operations. Trump said it is over Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's unwillingness to help with migrants. Last month, Trump sent Rick Grenell, the envoy for special missions, to Venezuela in what appeared to be a thaw in the relationship. Chevron has 6 months to exit. I have no idea what is itching my nose. Trump says the Environmental Protection Agency will cut up to 65% of staff, but then the administration walked that back hours later, noting that it was about 65% budget cut. So, Trump doesn't know the difference between staff cuts and budget cuts. Why am I not surprised? Wisconsin cheesemakers sent a letter to USDA demanding congressional authorized dairy subsidies to be unfrozen. In case you thought that these freezes didn't actually hurt businesses. The Office of Management and Budget sends out a guidance memo to agencies on pillars to guide layoffs. House Speaker Mike Johnson insists on CNN that House Republicans will not make massive Medicaid cuts to pay for Trump's agenda, all the while making massive Medicaid cuts. All right. Rubio says a deal with Ukraine is on the half-yard line. Alrighty. Not so sure about that, but okay. Trump says tariffs will go into effect March 4th against Canada and Mexico, as well as another 10% on China March 4th. Unlike instead of April, because again, someone taught Trump how math works. USAID staff instructed to pick up their belongings Thursday and Friday. They got 15 minutes to clear out their desks. And there were people who were crying about it. Literally crying. The UK Starmer meets with Trump at the White House and offered him an invitation to a state dinner from King Charles. Starmer noted that the UK will be increasing its defense funding and is all in on supporting Ukraine. Trump said he supports Article 5 of NATO, and that essentially says an attack on one is an attack on all. Trump also said a minerals deal would serve as a security backstop. Okay, First off, I'm really curious how that meeting with King Charles will go, because I don't know if he has his mother's tact. Like when she met with Trump, she was wearing jewelry that Obama gave her. Yeah, she was needling Trump, but he's too stupid to know what was happening. I don't know if Charles has that tact. It's possible he does. Either way, I would love to see how that meeting goes, because I can only imagine that Charles would not be afraid to show his contempt. Like when Liz Truss resigned as prime minister, she of the meme of who will survive first, a rotting head of lettuce or Liz Truss's prime ministership, and it turned out the lettuce survived longer. And his response was, "Oh, you're back already. Oh dear, oh dear." I can just imagine what amazing things are going to come out of King Charles's mouth upon talking with Trump. Let's see. Okay, Trump says he supports Article 5, which I'd be shocked if he actually knows what Article 5 is. That would just be mind-blowing if he did. I don't know what he means by security backstop. I honestly don't know. That first they give the minerals to him and then he'll send security? I don't know what that means. I really don't. I wouldn't put it past him, though. A federal judge partially pauses mass firings of some federal employees. Pro-Trump right-wing online influencer Andrew Tate and his brother were released from prison in Romania and flew back on a private jet to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Both were charged with human trafficking in Romania, and Andrew Tate has also been charged with rape. Both men deny the allegations. The Financial Times reports that the Trump administration pressed Romania to release them. Oh, that doesn't surprise me. Andrew Tate also happily calls himself a misogynist. Nothing good can come from someone who is happy to call himself that. So, yeah. I also read that Ron DeSantis was not happy when the Tate brothers landed in Fort Lauderdale. I think he told them to get out. Because unlike Trump, Ron DeSantis has some integrity, and having horrible human traffickers and rapists is, a line too far. So anyway, The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau dropped 5 major legal cases. In one of the cases, the CFPB had accused Capital One of failing to pay more than $2 billion in interest to customers by misleading them into thinking they would be getting higher rates. You know, the bureau that Musk wants to gut. Because, you know, they would otherwise be regulating his app because he wants to allow financial services on X as well. So we can't have people regulating that now, can we? Vance to speak at National Catholic Prayer Breakfast. Vance chided bishops over immigration earlier this month. I assume the chiding was the fact that bishops, you know, wanted to keep their churches a safe space, that if an immigrant were there, that the federal government can't take them away. I assume that's what it was. The Supreme Court's decision on USAID is expected. And as of this recording, I don't believe they've made a decision yet. But I just got a bunch of notifications, so I will quickly swipe and see if I see anything. Zelensky is expected to meet with Trump at the White House. So let me quickly check if there's anything about the Supreme Court. I don't think so. Whoops. Nope, doesn't look like it. So we don't have a decision from the Supreme Court yet on USAID. But I did hear something about John Roberts wanting to side with Trump on something, so I don't know. I really don't know. Anyway, that is all I have for this video, this super long video. What is with me and doing 2-hour-long videos? So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.